Hey guys, welcome to Superlative Radio. Dylan Stone here with you. Hope you enjoy the following vlog.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Superlative Radio vlog. I'm the Saw, and this week I've been doing a lot of online reading, as I'm sure the rest of you guys have, with what's going on with the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And I did a couple of vlogs already on, the fact that, there's a lot of racism and, the importance of history, and there's just so much going on that I thought, we're on the cusp of something in our society, both good and bad. And what it really comes down to is we have two extreme sides. And I know there's a lot of people here who don't think that they're extreme, but you are. You're being extreme. If you're on the left, and then if you're on the right, the extremes there are so far apart that they almost circle back to each other. The fact that I don't think either side understands that you have to listen to the other. You have to take things that the other side is saying into account, and you have to think about them. I've said many times that political extremism is bad, and it really is. And it doesn't matter which side you fall on. You can be, okay, well, we've all got to be equal, and we've all got to be this, and we've all got to be that. And then you have the other side saying, I'm not ready for this, and I'm not ready for that, and I'm not ready, What it boils down to is we have to move at a pace that all of society is comfortable with. You can't just shove shit down people's throats. So regardless of what side you're on, when it comes down to it, we have to think what's good for society as a whole. There's a lot of things being said right now about people in history. The fact that, well, these people did this and these people did that and these people were oppressed and those people were oppressed. And, I get that. And when you study history, there's a whole lot of it. And every race is guilty of it. Every one of them. It doesn't matter. If you want to look back, we can look back and we can see how, the Japanese were treated during World War II here in Canada and the United States. We can look at how the Jewish people have been treated historically for thousands of years. We can look at how the blacks were treated, as slaves in North America, for, hundreds of years. And then you can look at the way that the indigenous population, the natives, were treated by the Europeans. And you can look at how the natives treated each other. You can look at how the Japanese treated the Chinese. You can look at how, there's just so many things in history that we can talk about where everybody is guilty of something. And, we can look back and see how the Christians were treated by the Romans. We can look and see how the Christians were treated by the Islamic people. We can look at how the Islamic people were treated by the Christians. And there's so much in history that if we want to start picking apart history and saying, well, this person did this and this person did that, well, I got news for you. At some point you go back, we're all related. We're all interconnected. And when you start picking apart things in history, you have to understand that you can't judge history by the standards of today. So when you look at the past and you say, okay, well, this person is guilty of slavery 200 years ago. Okay, sure. Is slavery a bad thing? You're damn right it is. 100%. You're not going to hear pretty much anybody agree that slavery is a good thing. But yet you still have people on the left calling people racist because they don't want to just wipe shit away and think, well, this happened 200 years ago. It happened 200 years ago. You can't judge society in the past by today's standards. And the reason for that is very simple. 200 years ago, slavery was acceptable. Okay, that's a fact. We all may think today that it's a bad thing, and it is. But 200 years ago, it was a fact of life. It was acceptable. It wasn't considered wrong to own slaves. And let's keep in mind that not everybody who owned slaves treated them poorly. Okay? Some were treated very well. Yes, they were still a slave, but they were still treated very well. And slavery has been common in human history pretty much since the beginning of humans. It's not anything new. Doesn't make it right. You can't simply judge the past by today's standards. You can judge slavery today by today's standards and say, hey, you've got slaves. Wake the fuck up. This is, that kind of stuff you can say. But you can't judge somebody who lived 200 years ago and had slaves, because at the time, 200 years ago, it was acceptable to have them. Just like 400 years ago, it was acceptable to marry girls that were 13 or 14 years old. Just like 1,000 years ago, it was perfectly acceptable to kill somebody just because they looked at you the wrong way. Or you can look at it and say, well, they're a different religion than me, so it was perfectly fine to kill them. Were those things wrong in the past? Of course they were. They're 100% wrong. And we should be more liberal thinking today and more progressive. That is a fact. You can't judge the past by today's standards and it's not that saying that, well, we're acknowledging them. Like if you start taking things like statues and you start tearing down statues, like right now there's a big thing where in St. John, New Brunswick, there's two streets, Ludlow Street and Winslow Street. Ludlow Street is named after the first mayor of St. John. But he was instrumental in the early 1800s in bringing slaves to New Brunswick. And people are all up in arms about changing the street names, and there's people that are for it and people that are against it. And personally, I'm on the side of I don't think we need to change the street names, not because I approve of the fact that the guy brought slaves over, but I'm not going to judge a man who lived 200 years ago by today's standards, because 200 years ago, when he did that, it was acceptable. He's also the first mayor of the city. St. John is the first incorporated city in Canada, meaning it's also the first free city in Canada. And that means that as such, was it wrong to have slaves? Yes, it was. The man is responsible for helping bring about the first free incorporated city in North America. That still deserves recognition. And if it's only in a street name, hell, it's better than the statue as we were talking in the car, because we're in St. Martin's right now. And on the way down, we were discussing this very thing. And we have a statue in St. John to Samuel de Champlain. I don't know, those of you who know too much about the first start colonization of this area, but Samuel de Champlain was one of the first people to lay eyes on this area. And was he a good person? If you judge him by today's standards, hell no. But back then was a completely different thing. But we have a statue to him, and nobody's talking about ripping down a statue of a guy who married a 13-year-old girl and, wasn't too nice to the natives. That's, if we judge him by today's standards, he was an asshole. But back then, people didn't judge it that way. And you can't put today's standards and ideals on people who lived in a completely different time, who were raised in a completely different time, with a completely different set of beliefs. It's not right. History is history, and we need to study history, like I said before in one of my previous vlogs, so that we don't repeat it. But it doesn't mean that we need to take everything away. There's a school in St. John named Samuel de Champlain. Should that school be renamed? If we want to start renaming things and we want to start removing things, holy crap, we're talking about history, people. No one is saying what they did is right. And going forward, should we continue to name things after them? Maybe not. Maybe it's the point, but should we erase what's already been named after them for what they did do? Well, you can still appreciate the historical aspect of somebody without being approving of what they did. The people on the left, well, they don't get that. They're just, no, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. Well, I've got news for you. When you start throwing no at people, just like people on the right saying yes, both of you are equally wrong. And you're not listening to the other side, and you cannot have a rational discussion with anybody who doesn't have an open mind and isn't willing to listen to both sides of the aisle, both sides of the argument. So if you're standing there and you're saying, no, That's wrong. Well, I got news for you. You're the one that's wrong. You know, it doesn't matter what you personally believe. If you're not willing to listen to every viewpoint and understand why people are, you can't just say, well, you don't want to rename that street, so you're a racist. No, that doesn't make you a racist. Just because you want to go, well, you know what? Yeah, the guy was a dickhead for bringing slaves over, but I'm judging him on today's standards as bringing slaves is wrong. But he also was the first mayor of the city, brought about the first free incorporated city. Maybe he should be recognized for that. There's nothing wrong with that stance. And it doesn't mean that if you believe that, you're a racist. I mean, that is the most ridiculous thing in the world I have ever heard, to call somebody racist simply because they want to be okay with the fact that somebody did some good shit, but they also did some bad shit. I'll bet you if you look back through your own personal life, every person today, is there some shit you're not proud of? I'll bet you there is. Should you be judged on every bad thing you ever did and not any of the good? If that's the case, if you can honestly look at yourself and say, I never did anything wrong, I never lied, I never cheated, I never stole, I never whatever, then good on you. You are the first person in human history who's never had a fucking sin that can be laid upon them. And if you are, then you have the right to say something. Until then, shut the fuck up and don't throw stones at glass houses when you live in them. Because if that's the case, you literally are just as guilty of anything you've done, and people have the right to judge you for it. It's stupid. Are most people at heart good people? Yes. 200 years ago, when these men are now being judged of this, were they bad people? I don't know. I didn't know them personally. Can anybody today say they knew them? No. Can anybody today say that they personally interacted with these people so they know exactly what they were like? No. You got to remember, one thing about history is that it is always told from the perspective of those who were on the right side, the winning side, and told from the perspective of people who want to make themselves look in the absolute best positive light. So does that mean that the guy was a jerk? He may well have been a complete and utter asshole for bringing slaves over and doing maybe whole kinds of horrible things. Okay, but you cannot take away what good somebody did simply by looking at the bad. It's not like the guy was Hitler, for fuck's sakes. Hitler's guilty of killing 10 million Jews. You know, you can't excuse that. Did he do any good? No. Is there any point in history you can look at Hitler and say he did some good? No, he didn't. Never. He never did a good thing in his life. If you study his friggin' life, he was an asshole from the time he was in World War I. It's simple. There are certain things you can look at and say, yeah. You know, if you look back at the pharaohs of old in Egypt, they had slaves. Does that mean they were all bad people? Some of them may have been really nice to their slaves. You have no idea. We don't know. We can only judge today and say slavery is a bad thing. Yes, it is. Do Black Lives Matter? You're 100% right, they do. Everybody has the right to be treated with dignity and respect, but it doesn't mean you need to ignore things. Look at what happened with Sir John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada. Was the guy an asshole? Yep. But he was also the first Prime Minister of our country, and that does deserve some respect. He helped to bring about the greatest nation this planet has ever seen. And you might disagree with that by saying, well, I'm an American and America's the greatest country. Yeah. No. In all reality, the fact is everybody's going to say that about their own country, but very few countries can say they are as progressive as Canada, that they are as understanding as Canada, that they are as accepting as Canadians are, or that they are as generous as Canadians are. I'm not saying that other countries don't do those things. Sure, but I mean, I'm Canadian. I'm biased. Yep. I do believe my country is the best country on earth. 100% I believe it. I wouldn't live here if I didn't think it. And if you don't think it, then maybe you need to get the fuck out. It boils down to the fact that we cannot judge people today or judge people then by today's standards. You can't. And it doesn't mean that we approve of everything they did. We can only go forward and hope to do the right thing from this point forward. Meaning, we need to correct things today that we can change, that we can make better. But it doesn't mean we should ignore the deeds of those in the past based on bad things they may have done. You need to also look at the good that people did. Because back then, the things that we consider bad may not have been considered bad then. Anyway, that's my vlog for today. I'll catch you guys next time, right here on Superlative Radio.
Hey guys, thanks for watching Superlative Radio. Come back anytime, and when you do, please make sure you subscribe, make sure you leave a comment. We really want to know what you think. We'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, because that's the way it's supposed to be.